It's the Blues Rock Show with Pete Francis and Willie Witten.
Welcome to the Blues Rock Show. I'm Pete Francis, joined by Willie Witten. It's just Willie and myself this week. We don't have any guests. Willie scared them all away.
Yeah, well, Pete, we sort of depending upon that. We got 4 in before we blew our credibility. I don't think that's terrible.
Yeah, we're done. But we do have some good topics this week, and let's talk about that because the Blues Music Awards nominees are out now, and it's pretty interesting, and they've got a couple blues rock categories, Willie. So let's talk about those first. And first, we're going to talk blues rock artists, and I've got the list of nominees right here. So for blues rock artists, we've got Tinsley Ellis, Reverend Peyton, Anna Popovich, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, and Mike Zito. So what are your thoughts on the nominees for blues rock artist?
You know, and not to be cliche, but I like them all. I'm a little bit surprised. I'm a little surprised at the difference between the list for the artists and list for the albums, and we'll get to that in a second. I am happy that one of the names that I like to see the most on there is Kenny Wayne Shepherd, because, and I know I sound like a broken record, but the album that was released this year, his live album, it just was that reminder of how, even though he hasn't been in front of everyone and maybe even as big of a name to the basic music community when he first came out, his musicianship and the people he plays with and the quality of his music have done nothing but gotten better over time. So,
and that was voted Blues Rock Review's #1 live album of the year.
And I think rightfully so. It's just a really incredible album. It's the type of album that makes you know that, like, hey, if Kenny's in town, if you got a couple dollars, try to go see him. So, like I said, all those artists, I have no complaints. The one I'm most excited for and happy for is Kenny. How about you, Pete?
So I think all these artists are definitely good artists. I think when you look at the list, there's definitely some glaring omissions. And I think probably the biggest omission would be you don't see Joe Bonamassa's name on the list. This year he put out Royalty, which was voted Blues Rock Review's #1 album of the year. And I think by all accounts, most people think this is probably one of Joe's better albums and definitely one of the best albums he's put out in the last 5 or so years. So it's interesting that he's not on the list. And I think when you look at these nominees, I think because of what Joe has done for blues rock as a genre over the past year, think about all the money that he's raised for all these artists struggling with the pandemic. You know, he's really been kind of the torchbearer for the genre and has really used his profile to help so many other artists. So if that's not worthy of garnering a nomination for blues rock artist, I don't really know what is.
Right. It was just last week we had Joanna Connor on the show. Who was helping her out with that latest album? Upcoming this year with Eric Gales. Who's along for the ride on that? Sort of guiding the stream there. It's the same guy. So I think he's certainly, it's not for lack of investment. I wonder if at some point he's become so ubiquitous and he's such, you know, when you think of blues rock in the modern era, he's going to be one of the first names. Maybe he's a victim of his own success. I know, once again, that's cliche, but maybe.
Well, it's interesting though, Willie, because you look over the years and you look at his solo work. This is not the first time where you looked at the BMAs and you didn't see Joe's name and you're kind of raising your eyebrow.
Right. So let's talk about, I've got him in front of me, the list there. So we have Ain't Done Yet, Savoy Brown.
This is for Blues Rock album now.
Yes, sorry. That's right. Blues Rock album. So what I would think would be the corresponding category. Ain't Done Yet, Savoy Brown. Ice Cream in Hell, Tinsley Ellis. Rock and Roll, a tribute to Chuck Berry, Mike Zito and Friends.
And that album actually was on Blues Rock Review's list the previous year. That was released late in 2019. Right.
Mississippi Suitcase, Peter Parcek, Ordinary Madness, Walter Trout. Same thing. I'm going to say it again. All the albums are worthy. Sometimes you see, like in something, I don't know, so let's say the Oscars, you tend to have a pretty tight correlation between Best Picture and Best Director. Maybe you have one that isn't in the other. And sometimes I feel like the Oscars uses that to get a name in that should be there. But in these two categories, there's so much disparity. You can't think if there's 10 options that either Joe's album isn't in there or Joe's in there. but he's in neither. I do think the word for that is potentially a snub, and I think it applies here. I thought
Yeah,
Royalty was a
and you
great
look at
album.
the albums. 4 of these albums were on Blues Rock Review's top 20. So there's definitely some good albums there. But yeah, to not have Joe up for best album is very surprising based on how this album has performed. Obviously, again, it went to number 1 just like most of his albums do. But yeah, it was really surprising not to see Royalty listed. A couple other names I'll throw out as far as not receiving nominations in either category. I think Philip Sayce comes to mind with Spirit Rising as far as blues rock goes. I think that's a fantastic album. No Anthony Gomes anywhere on the nominations this year. I feel like that's a little surprising. I think Gomes has built up some pretty good street cred, with the blues audience over the years. So that kind of surprises me a little bit too.
For one thing that I was happy to see when I guess it's maybe youth or young up and coming artists, that category of albums, 3 of the names that I got to listen to a lot reviewing for Blues Rock Review. And I thought all 3 albums were excellent in their own right. Harlem, King Solomon Hicks is up for that. Here I Come, Jose Ramirez, and then also High Risk, Low Reward, Ryan Perry. Any one of those 3, I think, would be great to see win. I'm just happy to see him mentioned because I thought the diversity in the actual music in those 3 albums is wonderful. King Solomon Hicks is a guy that conjures up images and sounds of B.B. King. He's very much a standalone player. It's classic, it's diverse, and it's wonderful. I thought Jose Ramirez, his writing and what he did on Here I Come was incorporate some great musicians and really, to use a sports analogy, spread the ball around. And as a result, he had a great album. And I thought Ryan Perry's gritty, rough, sort of howling wolf delivery was something I hadn't heard in a long time. So that, I guess, makes up for maybe the Joe Bonamassa snub, but I was surprised. But hey, it's an awards show and everyone's got their own opinion.
Exactly what you just said, Willie. No matter what, there's never been an awards show where everyone's like, oh, they got everything right. That never happens. Okay. There's always people that are going to say, how come so-and-so's not on here? It happens with literally everything.
Yep.
Before we move on, I want to talk about the contemporary blues albums.
Okay.
So there we had Cat Riggins, Cry Out, Kirk Fletcher, My Blues Pathway, Larkin Poe, Self-Made Man, John Nemeth, Stronger Than Strong, and Shamika Copeland, Uncivil War. And a few of those made our top 20. I was glad to see Kirk Fletcher on there. He did not make Blues Rock Review's top 20, but I thought that was a really solid album that could have potentially made the top 20 and for whatever reason just didn't get the votes to get on our list. But I thought that was a great album. So nice to see Kirk Fletcher getting some recognition there.
Do you have any person in particular in that category you think will take home the trophy?
I would probably put my money on Larkin Poe.
That's what I was going to say too. It just seems to be it got a lot of hype and for good reason. It just seems to be very much in vogue right now. But we'll see.
So Willie, let's kind of switch gears here a little bit. We both play guitar a little bit.
Yeah.
Now you can play acoustic, you can play electric. When you break down electric or acoustic, do you have a preference in terms of what you like to play and what you like to hear?
I think I like to play acoustic a bit more. One, because I think it makes my neighbors hate me slightly less, but also because it's very easy to set up. You pick up your guitar and go. It's very earthy. It's very raw. It's the beginning of blues. It's the beginning of guitar. But I guess when I think of, if you ask the question, I've got to be on the desert island with the one tree and the coconut, and I can only take one with me to listen and play forever and never the other, I think I'd have to say electric. I think there's just something that's so dynamic, and the options are just infinite. Compared to acoustic, there is some limitations. And I also think that the people who I listen to, I feel like I'd hurt less to lose only acoustic albums, only acoustic players, even though that's unfair to some of the post-war and pre-war guys. But I just could never let go of some of the electric stuff. What do you think?
I think it's an interesting question. For me, if it was to play, I think I would go with acoustic.
Okay.
And I think it's just something about the organic nature of an acoustic guitar, the rawness to it. It just feels a little bit more natural for me than the electric. Don't get me wrong. I love to, crank up the amp and play an electric. But I think there's just something about the raw nature of the acoustic guitar that just resonates with me. So I would definitely pick an acoustic to play. But as far as listening, I couldn't imagine listening to music without electric guitar. Because like you said, electric guitar does open up so many more options. And I think about some of my favorite songs and a lot of the music that I listen to on a regular basis. For the most part, it all has electric guitar.
Right.
And when I go to a concert, for the most part, I prefer listening to electric guitar as opposed to acoustic. Not that there's anything wrong with, bands playing acoustic at a concert, but it just doesn't really have the same sort of feeling as an electric when you're there in person listening to a concert. So yeah, acoustic for playing, but I think electric for listening.
I agree. So we're in the same boat here. The one thing I thought of, because I was playing my own devil's advocate, is whether you're playing or listening, this applies to both. What's nice is to have references to the people that started it in the place where it starts. And so there was a moment, and obviously, who knows? Ask me this question again in a year and I might feel differently. But there was a moment even just today when I was thinking about this, and I thought, if I don't have the acoustic stuff, the Robert Johnson collection is gone. Son House is gone. Some of the Lomax recordings and those things, the field recordings, just the work songs, all that disappears. And so would losing that reference point sort of make you get lost in the electricity? Now, I don't think so. It's just the one devil's advocate I could think of, but.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So let's switch gears again. Now let's talk about record labels.
Okay.
And it's really interesting talking about how much a record label means to an artist today and the impact that record labels have on artists today, because you do see a lot of musicians having a lot of success as independent artists. Take Joe Bonamassa as a perfect example, Larkin Poe.
Yep.
Artists who've been very successful independently without using a record label. They've been their own record label. So Willie, how important do you think record labels are today for musicians?
I think it's very much an individual decision. And by that, I mean individual on what you are willing to give up, what you want direct control of. And I think on the other half of individuality is, what is your position? And I think especially during this whole, and it has been in a way a crisis, not just health-wise, but in the music industry, what is your position to weather a storm? How financially secure are you? And I think that we love to talk about, because anyone would love to just talk about it from a music perspective. But the reality is this has been really hard. So I think when artists go into a label decision and what it means, I think that's something they take into account too. So I don't know. I if you gave me an artist, I might be able to tell you what I think they should do. But I don't know the industry that like they do. I think the labels have been a little difficult in this transition to this new streaming, platform. And I'll get to that more in a second. But what do you think? I mean, what should be the biggest key, Pete, when you look to make the decision, the art side or the finance side?
Well, I think it really depends on the artist, and it really is sort of a case-by-case basis. Now, I think if you're already an established artist, I think it could be very beneficial to go off on your own and start your own label and kind of do everything yourself. Although you have to be able to have a team in place to be able to do that. You've got to have good people around you. You need to have a great publicist. You need to have good management, people who know what they're doing around you. You need to be able to get your music out on the different platforms. And there are different programs out there like TuneCore, things that get you on Spotify and iTunes and Amazon and all these different platforms that kind of take care of that infrastructure for you. So I think those things all need to be taken into account. I think if you're an up and coming artist or maybe a lesser known artist, I think it definitely is a big benefit to be on a record label because they can kind of handle all that marketing and promotion, and they can kind of push your music out there. So you build up that audience and you get known. They can help you get on the tour with, so-and-so where you're opening up for them. Where if you're independent, it's a lot more difficult to do that. So I think there are the pluses and minuses. I look at an artist like Richie Kotzen, for example, who was on record labels for many years, but now he's an independent artist, and he had built up an audience and had been on labels for many, many years. But now he's an independent artist and he's extremely successful as an independent artist. And I think for someone like that, or someone like Joe, artists who've built up an audience, I think they can really, really benefit from going independent, as long as you have that sort of, the right people in place. And you have to have that marketing mind, because not everybody can handle all those different things, the social media, the marketing, and getting your music out there. Some artists, that's just not their thing, and they want to focus on the music. So for them, being with a record label can be a good thing. But for other artists who are more comfortable with social media, can go out there and market and promote themselves, then it might be more beneficial to just go out on your own.
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate analysis of where that is. Something that it was actually sent to me by someone a couple of weeks ago. It was up from January the 19th. This was in BBC Music. And this gentleman, Mark Savage, a reporter for BBC Music, had Tony Harlow, Jason Illey, David Joseph, all chairman and CEO of respectively Warner UK, Sony UK, and Universal UK. A couple things, and this is small segments of the bigger article, but a couple quotes I'd like to read here, because it made me really think of a couple things. The three record label bosses collectively rejected previous characterizations of their business model as exploitative or unfair to music. The labels also defended the current business model, where musicians receive an average of 20 to 25% of the royalties generated by their music. And then also, the streaming market is an evolving situation. This is Tony Harlow. It is being well governed by a market that is efficient and nimble, and it doesn't need any change. Now, I'm going to put aside the agree or disagree aspect. That is a whole nother topic for another time. But I think that what it made me think after I read the entire article a couple times was that whether you agree or disagree, whether it's true or false, what I heard was that with streaming, with the big labels, if you're an artist now, I think that the labels themselves are quite all right with how the industry is going, even if the artists aren't. So I guess the buyer beware would be, in my mind, it sounded like the labels don't have a problem with how things are going right now. That would be something I'd leave with, but just because we can forget about the right or wrong, it seems like that's what artists are going to be dealing with, at least for the near future, even after this pandemic. So I don't know. And I don't know where that takes the industry, Pete.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting question. What do you guys think? Let us know down in the comments section below, and let us know what you guys think about the nominations for the BMAs. I know a lot of people have different opinions. We saw some in the comments on the article on Blues Rock Review. So let us know down in the comments what you guys think. Please hit that like button. That definitely helps the algorithm out and kind of helps the show out. And make sure to hit that subscribe button. But for now, he's Willie Witten. I'm Pete Francis. This is the Blues Rock Show. We'll see you next time.